time, and it was just like, cool. Like, that's all that stuff that, like, you live and die by now, which is hopefully going away.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
I think there's two sides to that sword. I hope those things go away, but even to me, it's like those things are still important. Like, I still want to be on that list. I still want to fucking get my Michelin stars and like do all that. And it's funny, like, talking to Chef Costa over the years, like, there was some certain points where he'd be like, you know, whatever, the stars, you know. But then you talk to him for real, and he's like, no, like, I love them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need them, but it's like it's a gift that shows you all the hard work you did.
Sure.
You know, it's like, okay, wow, like, I have something to show the world now, and like, this is the stamp of approval.
Yeah, it's like you're not allowed. Like, I don't believe anybody that say they don't do it. Like, you might not do it for that, but like, if you didn't get those things, you'd be pretty bummed out.
You'd be, or if you lost it.
Sure.
Yeah, you'd be bummed out, for sure. That's why I was like, I still think, even though those things are not as important, they still are, you know?
Yeah. And
the James Beards and the fucking, all that shit.
Well, like, I go back to what I was saying about the clean slate with 2021 and what the pandemic has done. Is like, I really am hoping that those things don't matter anymore.
Oh, for sure. No,
like,
I
the beards and just, like, the controversy, like, them being, like, just the exposing of these processes.
Yeah.
Cannot be forgotten. Like, you look at what Bon Appetit has been doing in the reckoning, and just like the constant tripping up of themselves. They can't get out of the way of their own selves.
Yeah,
they can't learn. They can't. It doesn't seem like they're willing to change because of money, and like, that's what that comes down to.
Yeah.
And like, the beards, like, nobody's answering the questions as far as what happened this year.
Exactly.
Like, what the fuck? And so it's like, so who actually makes these rules? Nobody's willing to, like, speak about it. And I really, like, that would mean the world to me for that to, like, go back to care about what happens in your own area.
Yeah, exactly.
Care about what happens with your local media. I mean, that's just maybe the bias in me because my parents and their local newspaper, but, like, care about what your local says. Care about what local areas think, because it's like, why should I give a shit what people think about me in New York, and why should I care about that? But I did.
Yeah.
And I think I will forever now, because of just like how, like, hard it was for me to get the Bone app and the New York Times, and like seeing these things and knowing it's like, I don't think I'll ever be able to leave that.
Yeah.
But I hope there's coming upon, like, you, if whatever you're doing next, and if you open your own restaurant, it's just like, you care about what happens and who's in your restaurant, and your community. And I think once that process happens, and once
you take care of that, everything else takes care of itself. Yeah. It's almost like you said, like, you know, you're going to therapy, you're doing things for you. Now you're much more of a leader for your people. Yeah. Than you were, you know, when we're young, and I'm still there, right? Fucking, I'm barreling through, and then you look back at maybe you were a little hot-headed when you didn't need to be, or you didn't lead someone in the right way. And you sort of, like, as you grow, you start to realize, like, oh, well, maybe that was the wrong thing.
Yeah, you know? I mean, I think, like, that's a bigger discussion as well when it comes to exploitation.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no shortage of that in restaurants. No. And that's, I think, man, that's got to change.
No, for sure.
That has to change. Like, like the exploitation of workers, and just how easily the restaurant industry can fit the cracks and, like, settle into the mucky underground of what's okay.
What the fuck?
And like, I'm like, well, it's like, you know, the whole snowball effect is just like, somebody at some point, I'll never forget this, Trevor Moran said this to me.
Yeah.
It's just like, somebody at some point got punched in the face in a kitchen, and that was okay, and now look where we're at. And it's like, I think about that a lot. It's like, that snowballed, and like, somebody got punched, never did anything about it, and now here we are. Yeah. And I think about that a lot. I think, like, and like, it doesn't even have to be as severe as punch in the face. It can just be lighting somebody up. It can be, you know, making it personal. Yeah. And that snowballs into that person doing it at the next place. Yeah. And that leads into, you know, you can do a stage with us, but you're not getting paid, or you're getting paid minimum wage. Yeah. When it's just like, you know, that's a whole discussion.
I mean, it's crazy now. You have to pay your stages in California, like it's a law.
What do you think about that?
I think that I don't think you should have to pay a stage, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I think that they're showing up there on their own time, mm-hmm. and I just don't think that you should. Like, they wanted to stage. Why would I get that you're hiring maybe, mm-hmm. but I don't think you should have to pay them.
So what are your thoughts on...
I think you should feed them.
Okay.
And that's their form of payment.
Sure. Sure. I guess, like, where's the line then? Like, is it 1 day?
I think it's 1 day. I think, 1 day stage is more than enough. Mm-hmm. I think if you're going to be a chef or a sous chef, it's fucking 3 days, and it maybe $100 a day.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I think those
are all things you need to write down.
I guess, right? That way I remember the shit.
Yep.
So I'm not like...
Because those are the things that, like, I think of, and it's like, that'd be a good idea, and then
you fucking forget about it.
Or it just doesn't happen because you didn't make that a cemented, like, I'm doing this.
Yeah, I do this, yeah. That's one of the lessons that I would talk to my young chefs about was, I'll just say the name Joe, for example. I'd be like, Joe, put my apron on like this. Mm-hmm. I work like this. I throw things away like this. Mm-hmm. And if you do not deviate from those processes that you have made for yourself that are perfect, mm-hmm. you will be unstoppable. There will be no, because you yourself have laws that you follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I guess, like, what's also your opinion on where that balance is of restaurants that accept stages and need stages?
I think if you need stages, you maybe have grown beyond your mm-hmm. means, but also the reason why Noma is the best is because they have people who are willing to go and just be stages. Yeah, and just that's how they figured shit out. And I always
you cannot learn from those. If you don't learn from those things, you're going to
learn from others' mistakes.
Yeah.
What for sure.
Like the restaurant that Oberlin is. And
so after a certain point, you're in Oberlin, you're in Birch, and sort of where do you see the graduation of a boss / chef owner? Like, do you see yourself gaining the fruits of your labor, or are you just kind of having to work more?
Oh, I would say absolutely having to work more.
Yeah.
Just because of how things are now.
Exactly.
But I don't mind it. Like, we have our full kitchen crew here, but also I'm, in here baking bread. And, like, so I guess it all has to do with what you, as a owner or a manager or anything like that, when you start to shift your priorities into becoming a manager to knowing you're that person, so what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
And I think, to touch back on me saying that, like, cooks that come into my restaurants in Rhode Island are young. And so we're very much a stepping stone in their career, in their trajectory. And to then be like, okay, what do young cooks need? As like as that sounds kind of like fantastical and like kind of like, but it's true in the sense that you need to figure out, okay, you're the manager, you're the owner, we all know that.
Yeah.
So then what? So then, like, it's like it's important to expose young cooks to things that I know I didn't have, and that's things like we're making our own breads, we're making our own pastas, we're breaking down all fish from whole, which sound very basic to somebody that's like, from major city or worked in very high-end places. But it's like, think of like when you were in culinary school or when you were a 19, 20-year-old, were you doing that?
No. Yeah, exactly.
And I think like...
We're getting sides of fish in.
Exactly. You're getting fillets in.
They're fillets, yeah.
Yeah, you're just getting in, like, that's it.
Yeah.
You're not having to figure out what to do with the rest of the fish. And I think that's important because, like, we see here how we compost and how we go to farms and how the farm's delivered here. Like, when I was telling you about Wishing Stone dropping off here, it's just like, that's Wishing Stone. They, like, not a lot of people, like, all of these guys know who Wishing Stone is. They know who the farmers are. They know who they are. It's just like, that's going to be instrumental for them knowing what the food chain is wherever they go after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think now there's been a spotlight shown on just how exposed cooks are to terrible treatment.
Yeah.
Poor pay. Mm-hmm. Poor work to life ratio. And I think that's something that I didn't have that. I didn't have a ratio.
No.
I didn't have that balance, It's just like I went, I'm not saying that's why I went through a divorce.
Yeah.
But it didn't help.
Yeah.
It wasn't not a reason why. And I keep thinking back to that summer where it was just like my mental health went unchecked.
Yeah.
And so something that I do is like I talk about my therapy appointments with my staff. I talk about the fact that I have a therapist. I went to therapy. I talk to my therapist.
Yeah.
And like anybody wants a therapist, holler at me.
Yeah.
It's like you can there's homeopathic therapists like Zen therapy, and there's things like that where it's like it doesn't have to be psychological. It can just be like a feel good.
Exactly.
If you just need to talk and you need to have somebody just like agree with you.
Yeah.
Or there's psychiatry, and there's seeing somebody that can say, like, my anxiety is so bad I want to throw up every time I wake up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of cooks have that. I've had that. I think a lot of cooks, like, going into a restaurant that they felt anxious about. Like,
yeah.
That morning I'm reprinting prep lists in my brain and writing them down so I hit the ground running, which means that 3 hours of my morning was spent making a prep.
Yeah.
It was like that was spent making a prep list. And, like, that shouldn't happen.
I mean, I think... in my experience, if I didn't do that at the restaurant at Meadowood, I would not have survived. And looking back on it now, I appreciate that it made me think of my career and my path outside of work. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, it's all about balance, like you said. My balance was going home and smoking weed, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to spend 8 hours smoking weed, for me, it's like, no, I'd rather spend 4 hours making a prep list and getting ready, or else... I'm just going to fucking be left to my own devices and be not productive, So it is unhealthy to get lost in it, but I think for me it was something that I needed for at least a short amount of time to channel and focus, because I'm not very focused.
Then I think that goes back to having an owner or a manager talk to their staff.
Yeah.
And realize where their priorities lay.
Yeah.
And I would like to... I feel like I'm assuming here, but I feel like you would say that to Chris at that time. Like, look, I'm either going to smoke weed or I'm going to think about work all the time, or I'm going to get ready for work. Yeah. So it's like you're going to saying that is helpful, and that's helpful for something like your chef to know. And honestly, if you work at a place and you can't go to your chef and tell them that I'm not doing well.
Yeah, yeah.
And how many times has it happened where a cook that you know of goes to you, no shows, or they just be like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, where it just gotten to that point where it's so bad they just can't do it anymore. And how many times is it that you think it's them, it's your it's like, oh, you're just a fucking asshole, you're an asshole.
I think that chefs training was always if they lose and if they fail, we fail, is always the mentality with him. So I think that it kind of was a different way of training and looking at it, because in Rhode Island, that's what it was. This guy can't make it because he's a bitch. Not because his parents are getting divorced. He just moved to Newport where he knows no one, and he has no friends. And then when he goes to work, he just gets yelled at for 12 hours straight. Of course that guy's not going to be good,
right?
Right. But I feel like you need a little bit of darkness to know when you're in the light. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So that's why I look back on those experiences and all the times that I did have, bad times in the kitchen, and I had to work overtime at home to get shit done. I don't know. I look back on it and I'm like, I'm glad I had to do that.
Sure.
Because I had to get through a struggle. Mm-hmm.
Not being able to do that though, I think now it has to be we have to be okay with that.
Exactly,
not being okay.
and that's fine, and that's where that's where we need to evolve.
Yeah,
I don't think that kids should do that.
Yeah,
in fact, I tell my sous chefs and everybody, the only thing that you should be really doing at home is taking care of you, not the prep list for the restaurant. Sharpen your knives. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's this is part of being a chef. If you're a chef, you live it, right? So that's what you should do. Go out to eat. Go for a hike.
Yep.
Spend time with yourself. because if you don't, then you're not a help to anybody.
And I think that's why, like, it's important for me to have that background of, like, with